Are you ready for your story today? Today we're reading The Best Nest. Who do you think is going to make a nest? Right, the birds. Let's look at this bird. Look at his face. How is he feeling? He looks like he's feeling pretty happy, right? He's smiling. It looks like these lines are telling us that he's singing something. Now let's look at this bird. How does she feel? She's wearing her angry eyes and a grumpy face. She's probably feeling very grumpy. This book is written by P.D. Eastman. Let's see what happens inside. Oh, there's a picture of them. What do they have in their mouths? That looks like nesting materials. Grasses, cotton, a little straw even. Birds like to find all kinds of stuff for their nest. There it is, The Best Nest. Oh, where are they building their nest here? Is that a good place for a nest? What will happen when the mailman comes along? Yeah, that nest will be in there, but the mail has to go in there. Written and illustrated by P.D. Eastman. Published by Beginner Books, a division of Random House. Here he is. This is just like the cover, huh? Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This was Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, my nest is best. We can see he's singing because these are musical notes. Sorry for my fingers, I was dyeing eggs today. Musical notes. And there's Mrs. Bird. Does she look happy enough to sing? Nope. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house. It is not the best nest, she said. She does not like that nest. I wonder what she wants instead. I'm tired of this old place, said Mrs. Bird. I hate it. Let's look for a new place right now. She is pointing her finger at him. She wants to leave now. Poor Mr. Bird, he really liked his nest. But do you think he wants to make Mrs. Bird happy? Let's see. Yep, looks like he does. So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. That is a hole in a tree. That's a good place for a nest. But why is that not a good place? Somebody's in there, a raccoon. But somebody else had already moved in. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. Can you make a nest inside somebody's boot? Why is that a bad idea? Yeah, what if somebody wants to put their foot inside that boot? And there you go. You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot. So now they have to go away and look for somewhere else. So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof. It says it has a pretty red flag, but that flag is for letting the mailman know if there's mail inside. I've always wanted a house with a flag, said Mrs. Bird. Maybe this place will be all right. Except, who's coming along? U.S. Mail. It's the mail person coming along. But it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. Look at that. No nest in there because that's where the mail goes. You make too many mistakes, said Mrs. Bird. I'm going to pick the next house. Flying, flying, flying. There's a broken piece of wood here. And here it is, right here. That is inside the top of a church. What's usually in the top of a church? Anyone know? Let's see. A bell. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big? asked Mr. Bird. I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is a place to build our new nest. But what's the problem here with a bell? What do bells do? Bong, bong, bong. And if you have your nest up there, that could be a bad thing. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. They got some soda straws and broom straws. They got some sweater string. Getting all these cozy things. They got some stocking string and mattress stuffing. That looks soft. They got some horse hair. They got some man hair. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horse hair, and all the man hair they could carry. They took it all back to build their nest. See, they have their beaks full. They're going to bring it in and make a nest. And there it is. Is that the best nest? It's a very lovely nest. Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest. This nest is really the best, said Mrs. Bird. I want to stay here forever. Mr. Bird was very happy too. He flew to the top of his house. He sang his song again. I love our house, I love our nest, in all the world our nest is best. He was so busy singing, he didn't even see Mr. Parker coming. What's Mr. Parker going to do? He's walking over to the church. He has a job to do. What is he doing? What's on the other end of this rope? Up, 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 up. Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest. The rope rang the big bell right under Mr. and Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, bong. Oh no, shaky, 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 shaky. Is that a good place to put their nest? No way. Mrs. Bird got out of there as fast as she could fly. Bong, 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 bong. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess. You see, when this happened, Mrs. Bird was in their nest by herself. Mr. Bird was not there. And if you see here when she's flying away, Mr. Bird is flying down to go in. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? She got scared away and Mr. Bird doesn't know where she went. I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high, he looked low, he looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. Where do you think she went? When you're scared, where do you usually go? You go to some place you know, some place you're familiar with. What's a place Mrs. Bird knows and is familiar with? He looked down into a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Then he saw a big, fat cat. There was a big, fat smile on the fat cat's face. There were some pretty brown feathers near the fat cat's mouth. Oh no! What does he think the cat did? Cats sometimes eat birds. Mr. Bird began to cry. Oh dear, he cried. This big fat cat has eaten Mrs. Bird. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. He's so upset. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. He couldn't see where he was going. It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest here until the rain stops. He's so sad. He's going to go inside in this birdhouse. Wait for the rain to stop. What do you think is going to happen next? Mr. Bird went in, and there was Mrs. Bird sitting there singing. I love my house, I love my nest, in all the world this nest is best. Mrs. Bird has learned that her old nest was the best nest. You here, gasped Mr. Bird. I thought you hated this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said, but a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. Sometimes we think we want new things, when really our old things are the best things for us. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. The end. Did you ever have something that was old and you thought maybe you wanted a new one? But then you realized that your old thing was actually your favorite? Sometimes that happens to us. Well, friends, thank you for listening to the story with me. I'll see you later. Bye.